perimenopause, there's a complete lack of understanding in how soon women need to start looking at this. Because it's the thought is 50, I hit 50. And then I'm like, no, we need to be talking about this in your 40s, early 40s, because it can be 10 years and they can lose a lot of joy and lose a lot of time on really getting ahead of it and making the whole journey much better. Because it's halftime. Women are going to be in their career. They're at their best, their peak career years. And then all of a sudden they're having like hot flashes and exhaustion. And it's not helping them in that role. And it can be really hard. So understanding it instead of trying to hide it and seeing it like as something they get to create, they get to have their own experience.
Welcome back, my listeners, to the Menopause Disruptor Podcast. This is a podcast platform about shattering silence, challenging stigma, and changing the conversation around menopause one story at a time, one episode at a time. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I am your host, Mary. If you've been tuning in for a while, so glad to have you back. And today we are going to tackle that topic that has been shrouded in shame and silence for far too long, and that is the profound impact of menopause on women's mental health. The episode on PTSD and cognitive behavior therapy have still been very popular episodes, so let's keep that conversation going. You know, for generations, the medical establishment has dismissed and pathologized or minimized women's health experiences, particularly during menopause, and we've been told to just deal with it, or that it's all in our head, or worse, that our emotional responses to significant hormonal changes somehow make us less capable or reliable. I call bullshit. This systemic gaslighting has left countless women feeling isolated, questioning their sanity, and struggling in silence with the intense emotional waves that accompany hormonal fluctuations. That's why I'm particularly excited about today's guest, Dr. Charlynn Ruan, a groundbreaking voice in women's mental health and the founder of Thrive. Dr. Ruan isn't just treating symptoms, she's challenging the entire paradigm of how we approach women's psychological well-being during menopause. Her work is dismantling the patriarchal structures that have kept women from advocating for their health needs and reclaiming their power during this transformative life stage. So in this episode, we're doing more than just pulling back the curtain on the complex relationship between hormones and mental health. We're creating a roadmap for women to understand and embrace their experiences, from mood shifts and anxiety to the profound identity transformations that can come with this phase of life. Dr. Ruan will share her revolutionary insights about why we need to start these conversations decades before menopause begins, empowering younger generations to approach this transition with knowledge and confidence rather than fear and uncertainty. So whether you're in your 30s and wanting to prepare for what's ahead, or navigating the peaks and valleys in perimenopause right now, or you're fully immersed in your menopause journey, this conversation is a crucial one. We're challenging the narrative that women should suffer in silence and instead building a framework for understanding, supporting, and yes, celebrating this powerful life transition. But before we get started, here's something you need to know about Dr. Charlynn Ruan. She is a clinical psychologist and the founder of a large group practice called Thrive Psychology Group. And as a psychologist and the CEO and founder, she works extensively with female founders and CEOs. She works on mindset and meditation-based treatments, EMDR, CBT, for insomnia, trauma, anxiety, entrepreneurship, career assessment and counseling, and healing for adult children of narcissists. As an expert in women's health, which includes trauma recovery, post-traumatic growth, women's empowerment and peak performance, mental health impact on perimenopause and menopause, her mission is to help her clients cultivate their best life during the menopause journey by recognizing and reframing beliefs about menopause and aging and the impact that hormone changes have on mental health, identity, and relationship shifts. This is so good. So sit back and enjoy. Good afternoon, Dr. Charlynn Ruan. I am so excited to have you talk with us today about some really important topics around menopause. First and foremost, recognizing that the hormone changes will have significant mental health impacts, but there's a whole lot of other things that are going on that need addressing, such as reframing how we think about menopause and aging. You and your company are the experts. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, and I feel it needs to be out there so much more. So I'm glad you're doing this.
Absolutely. We are breaking down the barriers and having those conversations openly and confidently, and allowing women to be able to share and understand that they're not alone. This is the journey we will all go through. Share with us your journey in creating Thrive and what motivated you to focus specifically on women's mental health through menopause, and how the intersection of the two play out.
When I created Thrive, I did it to address things like this, menopause being one of the things that women have there's very little training given in psychology for a lot of the things that women go through. They're either just ignored or pathologized, or they're not seen in the context of all the other stressors. And so a lot of times what would end up happening is the women would be like, what's wrong with me? What's going on? And they just have a tendency to self-blame. And there was just not the tools out there to help women thrive. So our company, Therapy for the Modern Woman, and helping you move from surviving to thriving. And so I was just seeing a lot of women making it, but not thriving in various areas of their life. So I'm just going to have to create it because I don't see it. So created a group practice that focused on that. Everybody on our team specializes in different areas of women's health, and menopause is specifically of interest to me of the last few years. Well, because I'm also in that age demographic, so it's personally relevant to me, but a lot of my clients are as well. And it's something that is only very, very, very recently gotten any attention. And still in psychology, we don't get any training. We don't get any knowledge on this. We don't get training on it. And I've heard OBGYNs that have told me that they don't have a lot of training on it either. So unless you seek specialties in this area, you just don't know. And it's very much the same as what we were seeing across the board with other specific challenges that women face, being pathologized, handling it one by one solo, not communicating. It's so great to have podcasts like this because then it's opening up the conversations and communicating about it instead of women trying to like hide their menopause journey, have shame around it, hold all of these false beliefs. And so it's a huge passion of mine, and I just can't talk enough about it because I think it really is one of the most misunderstood challenges that women have to go through. And mental health symptoms are one of the first symptoms that appear. Okay. And because psychologists are not trained to see it, they're missing it. And women are losing their quality of life in many areas and blaming themselves and wondering what's wrong with me.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up because shifts in the thyroid, and of course, the outcome of that is a lot of the fatigue, sleep deprivation, not being able to sleep at night. And that is even recognized as some of the beginning stages, let alone before we realize we were in the perimenopause phase. And now science is telling us, research is telling us this phase that could last 10, maybe even 15 years. But it's all in retrospect, because when you hit that magic line in the sand where your menses is stopped for 12 months, which from a medical perspective would be that, okay, menopause. Then you look back and that 10 years behind you. A lot of career women, high achieving women, executives who you work with are looking back going, oh, that explains everything. But we don't know that until, again, we've been going to our doctors, been pathologized. We get the misogyny. It's like, no, it's not happening. Or it's just, it's an urban legend, or you're too young to have it, or it's depression. You're working too hard. Get a good night's sleep. Your approach at Thrive, though, integrates trauma recovery, neuropsychology, I'm trying to remember them all, and how you weave all the diverse elements of their high-performing women into creating a blueprint for success. My first question from that is, how does all of this take into consideration to give them a more comprehensive healing approach as they navigate through perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah. And it's interesting. So if you look at my bio, these things seem not as related to one another, but they overlap so much because a lot of high functioning, successful women have trauma in their past. And so I'm a huge proponent of post-traumatic growth model and I call it like, keep the superpowers, drop the kryptonite, because there's a lot of benefits from it, but then it's healing and those parts that are still causing harm. And it's an injury, not an illness. So it's very healable. And then also my neuropsych background, it helps me understand what's really going on in the brain. And again, I really didn't see prior to starting Thrive, there just wasn't a lot of understanding of how to treat intelligent, high functioning women. And a lot of the response that they would have is, I'm struggling. Oh, okay, you're working too hard. or do less, or maybe you don't really want to do it. I'm just like, wow, that's so insulting. And also not the answer. Just because there's, I use like a race car analogy. It's like if you're very high performing and high functioning, you have to take better care of your health. You got to get the pit stops and get those checkups more regularly. If you're tootling down the back road, you can have a door hanging off and it's fine. But if you're really trying to have peak performance and you're really trying to lean into what is the life you want and that you want to create for yourself, the bolts are going to rattle and it could end up in a fast crash. And so I try to look at it as all the aspects of themselves and how they fit in. And menopause being one of those, because a woman, she is situated in her family. She has her own history. She has her own beliefs. It brings up a lot of stuff around how women in her family have approached it. Where she's at. Is she married? Is she dating? Where's she at with her partner? Where are her kids at? And a lot of women are hitting, and you're right, perimenopause, there's a complete lack of understanding in how soon women need to start looking at this. Because it's the thought is 50, I hit 50. And then I'm like, no, we need to be talking about this in your 40s, early 40s, because like you said, it can be 10 years and they can lose a lot of joy and lose a lot of time on really getting ahead of it and making the whole journey much better. Because it's really a woman's, like, it's halftime. Women are going to be in their career. And like you said, they're at their best, their peak career years. And then all of a sudden they're having like hot flashes and exhaustion. And it's not helping them in that role. And it can be really hard. So understanding it instead of trying to hide it and seeing it like as something they get to create, they get to have their own experience. But they have to have a lot more information to do that than we currently have available. We're getting better though. There's a lot of women who are not going into menopause quietly in this generation. And I love that.
Me too. Thank goodness. We can't lean on our mothers or aunts or grandmothers and have that conversation. They were never having these conversations because it was inappropriate. Shove it away, pretend, deny, and shove it away. And so it appears that was the same approach that the generation of our mothers and our aunts and grandmothers had. And so it never existed. And therefore there was never a conversation. So we are almost rewriting or writing for the first time the book on this very significant health phenomenon for women. And we need to dissect it and have those healthy conversations. And in doing so, then, how does Thrive and your team at Thrive create that safe, empowering environment to help clients through their therapy, through mapping out a plan that they want to have for the rest of their lives so that they can achieve their best now and the years beyond?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it, and it sounds so simple, but this is how little women are prepared for when it does happen, because they haven't been prepared, is asking them, what's your age? And have you looked into this? It sounds like this might be related to hormones. Do you have a good doctor? Do you have one that specializes in this? And then, which a lot of them don't, like the regular OBGYN, a lot of them don't have information and don't have knowledge. And then having a conversation and asking them about it. And a lot of women, oh gosh, it's such a range of what people carry with it, but you're right. Their mothers, I mean, sex is the same, there's things that we're just, therapy is such a great spot to talk about all the things that you cannot talk about anywhere else. And nothing shocks me. And how many times people will be like, I don't know if this is TMI. I'm like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just asking the questions around it. If I know that a woman is getting into her 40s, I ask. And that may seem early for some people, but it's not for a lot of women. And then there's also putting it on their radar and educating them and empowering them and giving them resources around it and having them listen to podcasts, having them read books, having them, if they have the relationships where they can, ask their mom about the experience because it was rarely talked about. And also this is like the beauty and the complexity of a woman's journey through life and how the things don't always line up the way we were taught that they did. Many of my clients just finished a fertility journey to have babies, and now they're entering perimenopause. And so they're like, wait, what? A few generations ago or a generation ago, women were having children much younger. So they may not have even been home or had that kind of relationship with their mom to even talk about it. So it's really, there's a lot more stressors too on a woman in this generation that is still might be raising children, might be in a career. There's a lot of more pressures on women about that, but there's more resources.
For our listeners who might be thinking then, okay, I'm in that age bracket where I should start to be feeling some menopausal symptoms. Some don't, but there's higher averages around the hot flashes and the night sweats, insomnia. And now they're thinking, okay, how might some of my mental health issues show up? I've been driven and focused on my career, and I just keep plowing through, and then the hormones shift. And all of a sudden, that almost that veil of protection that's been keeping us safe and keeping us going and managing our cortisol levels just perfectly, they are gone. They're shifting, they're changing. And all of a sudden, these mental health issues start percolating. How do we help women understand there's not, like you had said earlier, it's not an illness. Some of it could be from a past injury, or quite simply, it's just changes in the hormones. How can we help them better understand you're not crazy? This is what you should anticipate, and this is then what you can do about it.
Yeah. So the other big symptoms that I see pop up, the ones that you mentioned, absolutely. It's so variable. It's really variable. It's hard to even find factors of like what aligns in each woman. I think we try to make these like absolutes, and everybody has such a separate journey in that. But anger, like mood swings, crying, like if they're like, I don't know why I'm crying now, or I just absolutely like screamed at someone in traffic, like what a lot of my clients is describing is just like rage. And if they're like, where did this come from? And they're just so confused. And they're like, am I okay? Am I losing my mind? It's the swings and the changes. Like we call that the mood lability. Like they're having these ups and downs in a way that they haven't before, and they feel out of control. And the sleep as well. And that's not just from the hot flashes. There's a lot related to sleep. And a lot of women are already struggling to sleep. And well, we're just built differently to not sleep as well, because we wake up, we startle. It's for evolution and keeping the babies alive, but still we struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you approach your clients, how do you make them then say, okay, this is completely normal. What is showing up, your symptomology is right on par with what is often happening in menopause. Now let's get to work doing something about it. Obviously, if they've come to you at some point, whether I guess through referral or self-referral, they've said, I need to do something. How is it that then you can sit down and say, my team works with all these evidence-based practices. Let's choose a therapy, whether it's a few things or a concoction of many approaches, to get them back to feeling their best, to feeling that quality of life.
Yeah. So it's such a different approach for each person that we work with. But like you said, having a range of tools and being able to tailor it and looking at them as a holistic person, and also what their goals are. And so that's, curating really their journey in the second half of their life too, because there really is not a lot around that. I think when a lot of women, they look out into the future, you kind of get your mid 40s, 50. Luckily, there's more and more women are standing up and talking about their age and menopause. And I love that. But what we were raised with, it's like golden girls.
Yes.
And then something fuzzy. These are my options. And so they can't even imagine the second half of their life in any kind of positive way. And I almost never hear someone respond when I ask them about perimenopause or menopause in a positive way. There are so many negative connotations and such a dread, shame, the annoyance that they have to go through it, anger. Nobody is like, maybe occasionally, but this is if they have like a very evolved and outspoken aunt, usually, or mother, who tells them that it's a great on the other side. You know what I mean? But the journey itself, people really looks at it in a positive way. So I try to help them reframe it and be like, you're in control of this the same way that you were in control of a lot of things in your life. Now, there's things you can control, there's things you can't. But with menopause, there's so many things that can be done. But I think it's a lot of changing your beliefs. I do a lot of questioning around, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about yourself? And there's a lot of really painful ones, that the whole pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. There's a lot of ones causing extra suffering. Nobody's going to want to have sex with me. I'm going to be unattractive. I'm going to start to look manly. I will be invisible. No one will notice me. I'm going to go crazy, drive everybody crazy. I don't want to tell anybody because it's going to change the way they look at me. And most of the time, those just aren't true. Most men are oblivious. they don't really care. I mean, they care as much as they care about their partner's health. But every time I've had a client, especially if they're in a long-term loving relationship, and again, in same-sex relationships, it's more complicated because if there's a similar age, they may be going through this at the same time. So you've got double the stuff going on. If you have two women going through menopause at the same time in a relationship. So that's its own beast. It has benefits and upsides and downsides of that.
Right.
But if they're in a long-term relationship with a man, most of the time when they ask their partner, he's like, what's that? Like, oh, wait, so, okay, so you can't get pregnant like later? And okay, does that change any? Oh, all right. Like that's usually like, they really don't care. They're not like, oh, you are no longer a sexual creature to me. I have no interest in being with you. Like that isn't at all. I mean, I think a lot of them that are loving partners approach it as, what can I do? They don't know. They're less educated than women are. And so they're willing to take the lead, which is also why it's really important for a woman to know what she wants out of it and how she wants the rest of her life to look.
I think that's really important that you did bring up the conversation around the husband. Is some of your work that you do involve bringing in the husband, or is it strictly focusing on women, or do you give them the tools to say, this is the conversations that you can have with your partner, your male partner, to help them better understand?
Well, and actually, Thrive, we started seeing just women, but because women are usually the tip of the spear of getting everyone in their family into therapy, now we see a lot of men and couples and kids. And so we do quite a bit. So yeah, we'll do like couples therapy around it, or we'll do a session where we bring in the husband and talk about it. But I also like to equip my clients to be able to speak to him about it themselves, because I want them to have a narrative about it and feel empowered. So we may practice what she wants to talk about. One of the symptoms that can happen is less sex seeking. That doesn't mean that you don't enjoy sex, you're not responsive to sex, but with the testosterone changes, the little gift that came along with ovulation was that little burst of testosterone. So all of a sudden you're like looking for sex, you're thinking about it. Yes. So if you have a woman who's busy with kids, busy with work, and then you throw in on top of it that they just are not thinking about sex, but maybe their partner is, and then he's being like, oh, he may feel very rejected and not understand that it's just not on her mind. And most of the time they do want to have sex once the environment is right, but they aren't going to be the ones to initiate as much during some periods of time with the hormone shifts. And they may have to change up how they do sex, which is something that happens over and over and over for the course of a relationship anyway.
Sure, this is true. Now, the work that you do, and I love how you put it, the therapy for the modern woman. I think that in itself is a very positive approach. Modern being, we're that generation that's going to talk about this and then do something about it. I was reading up on the website, you have cognitive behavior therapy, CPT, mindfulness therapy, work with ADHD, OCD, and as you said, also fertility. So then with recognizing the PTSD, when a patient comes to you, maybe our client comes, do they know sometimes that they have these underlying issues, or do they just feel like there's something not right? I need to work with what I have in front of me. How do you help them just go through that diagnostic and then looking at maybe the holistic approach, some of the therapies that you offer, and so that they can feel a little bit more empowered?
Yeah, I think that because so few women know of the cognitive and emotional impact of perimenopause and menopause, they do not come saying, I need help with the mental health aspects of my menopause. That being said, I get a lot of women that will come in. I do think that it brings to awareness things that were already lying dormant. I call it like the butterfly moments, these transformational phoenix moments in a woman's life. There's these certain things and events where it's like, this is a good time to think about what you're wanting to phoenix into, what you're wanting to butterfly into. And there's a lot of overlap with a lot of different changes. And also most of them at least have a bit more space from young kids. And like I said, I do see people that have pretty young kids still. And it's an interesting thing for them to be navigating two things, right? They're navigating maybe elementary school children and severe perimenopause, menopausal symptoms. Again, It's a different thing. So everyone has a different experience. And then that's going to factor into the kinds of changes that she's going to want to make in her own life to support herself through the process. You could be also empty nester. I see a lot of women that come like, I now have time to do therapy. I finally can focus on me. Also, there's a lot less stigma now in therapy. They'll come in and say, I've been living with this thing for 20 years. I want to talk about it now. And it's amazing because then they get to drop this baggage that they've been carrying for so long. And it's such a sense of freedom for them.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, but very rarely do people come in and say, I want to work on the mental health symptoms of menopause, which makes me so sad because I don't think anybody actually thinks about it from that lens.
Yes, it's as if they need that underlying diagnosis of something happened, whether it was a childhood, I think, like adverse childhood experience, or even a concussion that has led to, or an injury that's led to the PTSD. Yeah, it's as if unless something clearly had happened, that linkage, which, like you said, it's so sad because of cognitive effects, and we're finding out now that menopause is more of a brain health phenomenon. And that's when I like to help women understand is, let's just look at the science. This is the job of estrogen and progesterone. But when it's gone, the systems in the body have to make up for it until it finds that new level of homeostasis. Until then, you're going to be like gerbils in a cage, all rattled up and spinning until you recognize that something can be done and needs to be done. You just kind of go on autopilot and hoping maybe for something better to happen, but it's not healthy for us. We have so much more tools in the toolbox today. I've become a bit of a Facebook junkie with your little videos. I do love the most recent one, Don't Kill the Golden Goose.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was listening to that in the context of menopause, we're supercharged women who want to keep doing it all because we always lived this way in our careers, going through school to get our achievements, work. Hormones shift. And we're smack dead in our shoes and trying to figure out how to pivot, how to shift, how to change. And we almost overcompensate by working harder or trying to over people please. I guess that's the theory. What is it? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we're trying to. So what is it then that's happening to us as supercharged women and experts in our field, trying to still manage it all, that is forcing us to come to this realization in our life that there's things that need to be dealt with? If you're going to get to A to Z and you want to thrive, what's happening right now in your life that needs to be addressed?
I love this. Is like, I think, and this is why this narrative is changing so much, is because you have an entire generation of smart, empowered, resourced, committed women that are like, no. If you're not going to give me the information that I need, I'm going to seek it. I'm going to write books about it. I'm going to start podcasts on it. They take that hyper-focused, the good focus, like the high-powered nature of it, and then they become experts. So it's, and then they help others, and then they talk about it. That's another thing. Talk to your friends about this, is what I say. I'm like, I guarantee you're not the only one. And they're not, but they may have to be the one who opens up the conversation. But now it's becoming so much more talked about. I have clients all over the country, but the majority being in California, they're a bit more, they talk about it more. There is less stigma towards therapy, less stigma towards aging, and that's good. But you do still carry these beliefs from, it's one of those things where it's those moments in life where you have to explore, what do I already believe about this that I may be self-limiting? Maybe my mother experiences this way, doesn't mean that I do. And there's all these messages, and I have them explore, what are the beliefs you have? And I do this for sex. I do this for money. I do this for the other areas where, like, our core beliefs, we don't realize we have these whole belief systems built up, and really checking those. And that's part of CBT. It's part of just exploring and understanding your own distortions that you have and the beliefs that you have. And like, is this even yours? Where did this come from? Have you looked into this? And then looking into it and then thinking about it. And then also talking about the positive parts of getting to this part of life, because most of the time women just see the negative parts of it. There's a few that are like excited and they're like, oh, I feel like a weirdo because I'm just enjoying getting older and this is great. But a lot of women have a lot of stuff around it, especially if they're like newly divorced, out on the dating market. They're like, how desirable. I mean, again, it's just women are in different phases of life. So it's like looking at those things. For what you were saying around, I'll give an example of, I had a client who one of the symptoms she was dealing with with just rage. She just like rage was the only way she could describe it. She's like, I'm from here and I'm here and I am done. But knowing her in a holistic way, being like, well, you have a lot of anger you haven't expressed over the years. And we've been trying to get that rage crayon in your crayon box for a while. And so on the plus side, this is a chance for us to just nail it. And because they've been holding things in for years and we don't have a good female rage, there's a lot of things to be upset about. We don't have a lot of outlets for what to do with it. Mm-hmm. And our anger, how do you process through this? So some of it, it's really positive. I'm like, well, I guess you're going to have to deal with this now because you don't have a choice. And so talking about how it can become, again, one of those superpowers of like, depending on how you work with it. I mean, it's not great to go off maybe in the office and start screaming at people. Most of them don't anyway. And they mostly belittle themselves for it and be like, I can't believe I felt this way. I'm like, okay, well, it's giving you information. It's giving you wisdom. The same is true of when people are saying with PMS symptoms and they just dismiss everything that they feel or believe the week before their period. Oh, I was just crazy during that. I'm like, that low mood is actually associated. There's a really great paper called Sadder But Wiser. So there's a lot of wisdom when you're in a low mood. You might see things you haven't been willing to look at before. So it's about, don't write off yourself just because you're struggling with some of the symptoms. There might be other things you can change. And so trying to use it as a key, maybe to unlock some doors that have parts of you hidden behind them. It really could be so empowering.
So good. Okay. I have a lot of questions I could take in any direction because you gave so much great information. I think the listeners by now might be saying, but you talked about the golden goose. We need to know what that is before we go any further. So explain that in the context of what we just shared.
So again, in the video, I also cite my husband's wisdom on this. I like to cite him when he, he's not a therapist, but he lives with one. But he had pointed out, he had said, he's like, I noticed there's a difference between men and women and how you are with your company. And he was talking about me. He's like, you will kill yourself for your company. You will do anything for your company. You will work so hard. He's like, have you considered you're the golden goose? You have many golden eggs that you can lay. This is not your one that you need to stay with forever. You are the source. You are the one who's creating this. And he said, men will go from company to company. Now, there's other factors for that. It is, tougher, I think, for women to start companies, sell companies, get funding, all of that. But it's not just companies. I think it's a way that we approach life where we self-sacrifice.
Yes.
And we don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be our narrative. It's, I think, us and maybe artists. I must die for my art. I must be a tortured artist. Really? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to self-sacrifice. I think there's certain narratives around different roles, genders that we have to sacrifice. But what ends up happening, I mean, there's data out there that married women live a shorter period of time than unmarried women, but married men live longer, like significantly longer than unmarried men. And the reason they think behind that is because women sacrifice their own health and wellness to take care of their husband's health and wellness and to make them go to the doctor and to do all of those things. But we can still have them have accountability. And it's a good, you're investing in this man for life. You want to make sure he has good health because that makes our life worse if they don't. But we don't have to sacrifice. And so part of this work of thinking about how do you want to curate and architect the next half of your life is around that. Because sometimes what the demands coming in to a woman, like I would give another example of sometimes I've had clients where they feel all the pressure from their family to just give everything to their family. And whenever they take time apart to do their own thing, to go on a retreat or to, invest into work time or to do anything, their family is very upset about it because they want to spend time with them. And at the same time, I say to them, you are giving them what they need in the long term, not just necessarily what they want now. Every investment you make into your mental health, into your health, into your happiness. Otherwise, a lot of them have experiences of their moms feeling very empty, sickly, not having done the mental health work that they needed to do, which is starting to catch up with them later in life. They don't have friends. They haven't invested into passions and careers because they were sacrificing it all for their kids. And then again, it does come back where then the moms are maybe they're feeling guilty about their moms and their emptiness of their moms' lives. I talk to women saying, your kids may want you, even as adult kids, may want you to give all these sacrifices, but you can have a conversation if they're old enough and say to them, okay, you guys notice that grandma seems really unhappy. And I don't want to be like grandma where I don't have friends and all I do is sit by the phone and wait for your call every day. You may not want me to go do this thing right now. You might want me to drop everything and show up for you in this way. And I love you so much, but this is part of how I love you, is I have to take care of me so that someday you don't have to take care of me before you have to. And so you don't have to worry and stress, so that I can show up healthy and happy for you for the rest of your life. Because your kids are adults for a lot of your life.
Yeah.
And we don't think about the kind of mom we're going to be of adult kids.
That's true. Yeah. And we're no good to anybody if we don't take care of ourselves first. I mean, we hear it, we understand it, but how many of us actually put it to practice? How many of us are actually carving out that time for self-care, self-soothing, and just that recognizing, I feel rage, I feel angry right now. I need an outlet to let it go so that it doesn't become habitual or shift and control my behavior, because it's just an emotion. And that emotion's got to release, and then I'm going to be okay. So then
exactly.
What advice then, if somebody doesn't have it at their disposal, or even if they're working with therapists in your team, for example, but they're in those moments, those crunch moments where they may be at the office and they feel that rage boiling up, whether it's explained or is it just a byproduct of the menopause? What are some quick fix tools that they can do right in that moment to gain back that level of control, empowerment over their destiny?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with, again, like you said, in the moment, it's about managing your body and your nervous system, even more than it is trying to fix the external, right? You can usually come back to the external. Not always. Sometimes we have to have a quick response to something, but most of the time we can take a space. So it's about observing it, noticing it, what's happening in my body. What do I need right now? Do I need to get up and walk around? Is this something where I need to walk it off? I've got women doing boxing classes. They're loving it. You know, there's a lot of like, we may not have the physical, we have to think about the fact that up until very recently in the course of human history, every issue that we've had come up that's resulted in fight or flight or freeze or fawn has been related to something physical. Yes. And so our body's designed to expel this energy physically. So we cry because we need to expel that energy, you know, and that may be also a way that we handle anger. Sometimes women get frustrated, that sometimes crying is a response to anger to soothe, or we need to punch it out. We need to go for a run or stomp our feet or listen to music and dance. Like our body gets this stuff just stored up inside. And if the rage crayon has not come out of the box in years, then there might be some stuff underneath it. So let's talk about that. So it's in the moment. It's about helping them to feel like, what do I need? Checking in with their body, actually feeling their body, which is challenging for a lot of women. A lot of women can't feel their bodies for a lot of reasons. And so helping them to note that, and then working on regulating their nervous system. And then when their prefrontal cortex comes back online, they can make a lot better decisions about what they want to do next.
Oh, of course.
And so it's that not having to feel that you have to respond externally right away, because sometimes what will happen is you'll respond and then you'll feel terrible. So it's about paying attention to what's going on. Okay. And self-soothing, like you said. Sometimes too, one of our best soothing techniques. This might not happen at work, but it can happen at home. Other people are our best nervous system regulators, our people. So maybe even in the office, maybe you need a hug, or maybe you need to scream into a pillow. It's not feeling alone is one of the best things that you can do to get out of fight, flight, freeze. It's a big part of feeling. We're mammals, you know, we forget that our bodies are on board, and we spend so much time, we're a brain in a jar, forgetting what our body needs in the moment, that a lot of it is reconnecting to the body.
That is so good. Yeah. Reconnecting to the body, self-soothing, checking in, feeling into what's happening, having that quick outlet to down-regulate the nervous system. And then community, again, something that we don't spend enough time talking about, and women will isolate so often. And that goes back again to something you said earlier on, because they just don't feel the whole identity. We hang on to that identity of this young, vivacious, active, a role that we played in our 20s and into our 30s. It starts to shift in our 40s and then really shows up in its 50s. Again, when you're just climbing that corporate ladder, for example, or hitting the peak of your career, and you get stuck in that identity, and then we isolate and are afraid to reach out to our community. Just what is happening from a psychological perspective when we can connect with community, be it with just one person. But what is it from a psychological, maybe even a physiological perspective, that is happening when we connect with other humans?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to understand a little bit of the biology of it, but I won't go too in depth. So our nervous system is in levels, and our best level is our social engagement system. That's our rest and digest. That's when I feel open, I feel connected, I'm in community. Because like I said, we're mammals, we don't have claws, we don't have fangs, we don't have scales, but the reason we've done so well in the world is because of our ability to communicate. And that's partially because we evolved to be able to, it's a part of it, like through our evolutionary process, a part of our jaw and our ear shifted, and we're now able to communicate with much more depth and much more nuance in tone. And so it's our communication that is really our superpower as human beings. And so that is our best space. But then when we feel alone, we drop down into first fight or flight. And when we get into fight or flight, which is a very alone feeling, and it's against others, it's not with others. And it happens so fast. It's so biological. And so it's recognizing the symptoms, like what's shifting and the state shifting happens to us. So in a split second, blood rushes away from our gut. For men, it's interesting, usually goes to their arms because they tend to more go into fight, and women, it tends to go into their legs. So you stop digesting. So being chronically in these states, by the way, really messes up your gut health because you don't have enough blood to be digesting. You know, and you're gonna hear different sounds. All of a sudden, neutral faces look like people are mad at you. You see the world in a combative stance or in a scary stance, and it shifts even the tones that you hear, because now biology has kicked in, and the sole job is for survival. And you want to just, and you're attuned. You're like a threat sensor. And then the really sad state to get into under that is what happens if your body decides you can't fight and you can't flight, you freeze. And it's very bad for your nervous system to stay in that for prolonged periods of time.
Okay.
And that's luckily now it's much better understood, but it was so misunderstood for so long that women were really, really victim blamed for when they went into freeze, and women go into freeze quite a bit, even more than men, because one, we're in a lot more situations where fight or flight aren't an option. Where, we have a lot, men, we have more natural predators. I say there's that saying, men are afraid women are going to laugh at them. Women are afraid they're going to be killed by a man. So we really do occupy the world in a different way. And children too, they have even more threats, because then adult women, all adults can be a threat to them, and bigger kids. So the freeze state, you don't want to end in that, because that's basically your body saying, your nervous system saying, I can't fight, I can't freeze, or I can't fight. I'm alone. No one's going to help me. I'm basically going to shut down and hope that the predator leaves me alive afterwards and maybe just mauls me. And then I'll be able to maybe wake back up and I'll live. So it's a hope. It's playing dead. Your nervous system's playing dead. And that's such a bad spot to be in. So it's understanding that, and understanding that, like, the quickest way for you to get out of those is for another human being that is like, that you have identified as one of your people, whether it be a friend or a partner, to look you in the eyes, give you a hug, and be like, what can we do?
Yes.
And like, your nervous system's like, it's such a level of just not our conscious thought. We don't even understand. And it's not something we even know to seek. When we feel so alone, we might say, nobody else is here for me. I have to figure this out alone.
Of course.
And sometimes that is the case, but a lot of times, it's about building a community and communicating and having vulnerability. So so the connecting with someone physically is still our best. Second to that is being able to make eye contact, like here, like a Zoom is good as well. But like you said, even just knowing we're not alone, and that cognitive awareness of it really is so healing.
That is so important. And that you brought all of those facets up about the body, the biology of the body. I'm fascinated with it. But I also recognize that it could be a slippery slope, because having that initial, somebody's there, give me a hug, dopamine kicks in. Okay. Nervous system goes back, calms right down, cortisol levels come down. But then there could be a point where, and that comes into the old adage that, misery loves company. You've been put into that fear state. And now that mind wants to say, okay, everybody's got to be in that fear state. So I'm going to bring them into my trauma or into this scenario. And I think this is where again, another one of your brilliant Facebook videos, the nice versus kind theory might kick in. It's like, I'm going to be nice or I'm going to be kind. Nice would be, I'm going to validate everything that happened in that situation for you that would make you feel, okay, they really are an asshole at work. Oh, she never should have done that. So you get allies, but it could come to the detriment.
Yeah.
Because then you're playing a game. Whereas the kind says, I'm here to help you, but you've got to figure out a way to go back and approach this predator.
Yeah.
And sort out the conflict.
Yeah.
Which is so hard to want to avoid.
Oh, it is. It is. And I think it's tough because women do tend to be higher on the, the different personality traits. We tend to be much more agreeable than men. So we have a hard time, I think, standing up to our friends sometimes, not only standing up, but calling out, standing up. You can say it lovingly. You're doing it with the good intent, but it takes practice. Like you said, the nice versus kind. Nice is being agreeable, saying the thing, but possibly letting someone, like sitting at the sidelines and watching them ruin their lives. That's not kind. That's just conflict avoidant. But it might feel better. Again, it's a lot about, if you love someone, you're really committed to what they need. Even if in the moment they may not want the thing, you do have to go from your best judgment on something as well. But sometimes it's like, if your friend comes to you and their response is, oh, I hate my boss, I'm going to tell him off and stomp out. And that's oh my gosh, you're like validating the feelings. And this is true of kids, it's true of humans in general, but you have to connect with someone on an emotional level for them to listen to what you have to say cognitively. And so you can validate someone's feelings without necessarily saying that their perception or their viewpoint is accurate, but be like, yeah, I could see how you could see it this way, and that would suck. But what if he meant this? Or, isn't it going to hurt you if you respond that way? I mean, why don't you take a minute to think about it, and I'll help you look over the email. But it seems like you're the one that suffers, and your boss doesn't really care at the end of the day. But if you're out of a job because you had this moment where you felt this way, unless you feel really strongly you need to do it, and then it's your life. I mean, at the end of the day too, it's our friend's life to make their decisions. You can say, this is just my perspective. This is what I would think from the outside. And part of being in community is being with people you can be vulnerable with and who will help you with your blind spots, because we all have them, but they're never going to use your blind spot against you. And I think a big thing too for friends and for women, don't correct in public. Don't point out your friends' flaws in public or their issues or their vulnerabilities. Do it in private and say, okay, potential tweak to maybe how you present that. And you can use humor and love. And if you have the trust built up, and it's also an emotional maturity thing. If they're able to receive it, that's part of emotional maturity, is hearing things we don't want to hear and growing from them.
Wonderful. That is so good. We can take this so many different directions, because what you just shared is very good advice for when a woman wants to sit down and have that talk with her doctor about her menopause symptoms and really advocate on her own behalf. And approach them saying, this is my life. This is my quality of life that I wish I want to explore different options. I mean, that could be taken a whole different direction, but just the emotional maturity and emotional intelligence to be able to understand that ultimately it's about their quality of life, but to be in a place where they feel back in control, in the driver's seat, about making the choices for themselves. What, just one last question with our listeners. What advice would you give to women who are struggling to find balance and clarity in their lives, and then add on the extra challenges with menopause? What advice would you give them if they're toying with the idea of seeking therapy for the very first time, but are still living with that old mindset that therapy means you're broken?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, it does help that I think most of the time people that do come to Thrive, by the time they've gone through a website and they know that it's not about being broken. And I make a really big point about this, that therapy isn't just, and where do we go, by the way, right now in modern society for growth, right? Like, where do we go? So therapists, we're supposed to only be like the ER doctors of mental health, but we don't have a holistic approach. Where do we do peak performance? Where do we do growth? Where do we do that inner work? Usually it's done in more of a self-help way, but thrive, there's a lot of elements of bringing in what I would even say like coaching. So how is it you're creating or peak performance for women? We don't have a lot of that. I feel like there's a lot around peak performance for men, which by the way, a lot of the advice is different than would work for women. So I've had to draw on positive psychology. Sports psychology has great like information around peak performance and managing emotions and nervous system management that just doesn't get integrated into the approach. So I talk to them about it and I'll say, it doesn't mean you're broken that you're seeking therapy. It means that you're wanting to live your best life and you need help with that. And where else are you going to get to go? I mean, your friends are going to have their opinions, but it's going to be from their perspective. Your partner and your kids and your parents, everybody's got their own perspective. And they're not going to give you an unbiased perspective because maybe some of the things that have been hurting you have been benefiting them. So it gives a place for just judgment-free, talk about anything and just be very, very real in a way that women don't have many spaces to do that. And therapy is very much that place. And so, I talk to them a lot about like, it's your life. You get to make it look like what you want. And there's a lot of things when women, we do this to each other. We really have called out men for it, but I think most women know that we're the worst to each other about comparing, about saying there has to be a way to do something. What works for me must work for you. And especially around areas where we're anxious. This comes up a lot around childbirth where people get really, really angry and committed to their way of having a birth plan and everybody else is trying to kill their baby. Like, I think our heightened anxiety, a way that sometimes a negative approach we use to manage that is by judging others. And so when we feel comfortable about our life choices and what we've prioritized, then it's like free to be you and me. It doesn't matter. And then that's the beauty of having a community where everybody's good at different things, but it's not feeling like you have to be good at everything. And we still struggle with that. I have to be good at everything. I have to have the perfect house. I have to look perfect. I have to have the perfect children, the perfect marriage. I have to run my marathon on my way to the C-suite with my 5 perfect children and my perfectly happy husband, my 6-pack, and I never age. So there's, as we've expanded all the roles that we are open to us, we feel we have to do all of them.
And play it out on social media and be an influencer at the same time.
Yes, right. Instead of just deciding. I mean, I use a lot of humor around it. It's about prioritizing. I've had to do this in my own life to balance all the different things. I just will say, you know what? I know how to cook. I hate it. I don't do it. I'm not into it. If you're into it, God, I love being friends with love to cook. That's great. I'll bring the wine.
Yeah.
I think when we're comfortable with who we are and we really prioritize our strengths and our passions, which we are in a better spot like I said, half-time of life to make these decisions and to know ourselves, because we're all excellent at different things. We're not going to be in the same things, and nor do we need to do all of them at once. So maybe this isn't the time to go into hyperdrive on this one thing because I've got to work on this thing. Maybe I'll come back to this thing later. I'll have time later, or maybe I just don't care. And there's a whole lot of freedom in that. I'm a very sweary therapist, so pardon my swearing, but
beautiful.
I'll say, okay. I'll say maybe like I got no fucks to give. Maybe fucks are attached to like eggs. And as we run out of the eggs, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm out of fucks, because a lot of, and there really is drops in agreeability. There can be based on some of those hormone changes can benefit us in that way. Where a lot of women get more outspoken because there are some biological reasons to be pleasing and to want to mate, but it can be a really empowering time to just, if you combine that with wisdom and just a sense of grounded self, and prioritizing what you really care about, because you've thought about, what do I want to be when I'm 80? I'm going to imagine myself at 80. I'm going to imagine myself at 70, 60. Who do I want that woman to look like? And then let's reverse engineer it to get there. And if it doesn't involve like perfect cooking and a perfect house, then that's not your focus. If it involves that I traveled the world and I'm super healthy, then you should be taking care of your health and looking at now. Because who you are every day, those tiny changes are building that woman, and you have all the power in the world for that. So it's really first figuring out what the goal and the target even is, and then aligning your life choices to that and your priorities, and saying, and when someone says, oh, can you do this? Not, I don't have time. That's not my priority. I know someone else is great at it. It's just not my priority right now, but that sounds great, but that's not my thing.
That's right. That is so true. The modern woman is a wise woman.
Wise woman. Yeah.
She knows what is best for her and will lean into what is what is important and will prioritize as such.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good. Tell the listeners, where can they find you and your team and all of the sweet gems that you offer?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So if you want to find us online, it's mythrivepsychology.com. And gosh, I think we're now up to 42 states in the US. So
Fantastic.
we see people all over. Yeah. So remote and in-person therapy. And then I like making content to give women other ways to learn. So Instagram, Facebook, and I try to put out a few videos every week talking about things like this, as you've mentioned. So
They're great.
and it's,
They really are.
yeah.
It's a great way to
Thank
get
you.
to know who you are. It's
Thanks.
fantastic. Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
thank you. Thank you for doing this podcast. I really appreciate it. It really does. I mean, a lot of the knowledge that my clients do get is through podcasts. And that's a way that it's a modern way for women to connect to other modern women.
Yes. And this is an important one because there was a reason why there was so many downloads off of that solo episode I did on menopause and PTSD.
Yeah.
And then the second highest one was on cognitive behavior therapy. So this tells me that us wise women are paying attention and we want to learn more and feel like, okay, I'm not alone because it's being talked about. So this is very, very important. What you have to share, so significant. We'll get all those links in the show notes. I am thrilled, Dr. Charlynn Ruan, for coming on and sharing. It's been delightful.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If today's insights resonated with you, I'd love for you to be part of our growing community of menopause disruptors. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. And if you know someone who can benefit from these conversations, please share this episode. Sometimes a simple act of sharing can be the first step in someone's healing journey. And hey, if you're ready to take the next step in your menopause journey, I'm here to support you. You can find all my services at mlcoaching.com. Want to stay connected and get regular doses of menopause wisdom? Follow me on Instagram at Menopause Disruptor Podcast, where I share tips, insights, and real conversations about navigating this transformative phase of life. Let's continue to disrupt this menopause conversation together. Remember, midlife should be the best life, and it will be. Namaste.